Thank you.
Gentlelady's time has expired,
I yield back.
and the gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes Mr. Steube from Florida for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Attorney General Garland, in your Senate confirmation hearing, you referred to the January 6th protests as the, and I quote, most dangerous threat to democracy in your law enforcement and judicial career. In that same hearing, you even compared January 6th to the Oklahoma City bombing case you worked on, where 168 people were killed. In June 15th, a speech announcing a new enhanced domestic terrorism policy, you cited January 6th as a motivation for that new policy. You went on to describe January 6th, and I quote, as an assault on a mainstay of our democratic system. You have said that prosecuting extremist attacks on our democratic institution remains central to the mission of the Department of Justice. So suffice it to say, it's clear that you feel very strongly about using the full force of your position to prosecute those involved in the January 6th protests. What is not clear, however, is if you will use the same force against violent left-wing domestic terrorists. Just last week, on October 14th, a group of extremist environmental and indigenous protesters forced their way into the Department of Interior. They fought with and injured security and police officers, sending some of those officers to the hospital. The extremists violently pushed their way into a restricted government building in an attempt to thwart the work of the Department of Interior. Police arrested at least 55 protesters on site, but others got away. Mr. Garland, do you believe that these environmental extremists who forced their way into the Department of Interior are also domestic terrorists?
I'm not going to be able to reference that specific incident since this is the first I know about it, but I will say that the department does not care.
So this is the first that you know about an incident where protesters forced themselves into a federal government building right here in D.C. Like you didn't hear about this at all?
This particular example, it doesn't mean the Justice Department doesn't know about it, but I personally haven't heard about it before, what you're saying right now. But I want to be clear, we don't care whether the violence comes from the left or from the right or from the middle or from up or from down. We will prosecute violations of the law according to the statutes and facts that we have. This is a nonpartisan determination of how to do that.
All right, I'll make it a little clearer for you. And most of us are lawyers here, so we use evidence in court. So you got two pictures here. One picture is from January 6th of individuals forcing themselves into the Capitol. This other picture is extremists forcing themselves into the Interior Department. So looking at these pictures, and I know you say you're not aware of this, which blows my mind that you're not aware of violent extremists forcing their way into a department right here in Washington, D.C., into a federal building. But just with these evidence, with these two pictures that you see here of people forcing themselves into a federal building, would you call both of these acts domestic terrorism?
Look, I'm not going to comment about particular matters. This is a matter that...
I'm not asking you to comment on a particular... I'm asking you to comment on these two photos. You have two pictures of individuals forcing themselves into a government building right here in Washington, D.C. And one, you as I laid out, very welcomely call them domestic terrorists, but you're refusing to call groups like this, who commit the same atrocities here in Washington, D.C., domestic terrorists.
One I know the facts of, the other I don't know the facts of.
Well, I'm showing you pictures. Here's facts right here. If you want, we'll act like we're in a courtroom. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, January 6th, Department of Interior.
Well, as you know,
based on these pictures of people forcing themselves into the...
One picture is not going to be, I'm not going to be able to resolve a legal determination based on one picture. In the January 6th case, we have terabytes of video which disclose exactly what happened.
Speaker Pelosi, mindly, still hasn't released to the American public to view all that video that has been captured here in Washington and in the Capitol complex. But that's the problem that everyday Americans are facing right now, is they see these type of comments that you've made about January 6th, yet you're completely, and you're not answering my question now, and you're saying, well, that's an ongoing investigation and I don't know about it. But clearly, based on the pictures, clearly what has occurred, factually what's been widely reported in all sorts of different American outlets, that these individuals forced themselves into a building here in the Department of Interior, and you're refusing right here today before the American people to say, yes, that's the same type of activity that I'm going to bring the full force of the Department of Justice to come against, regardless of the ideology which you have said in the past, but you're refusing to do that today. And that's the problem with the challenges that this administration, your department is facing is everyday Americans who are seeing this on TV, and now you have the opportunity to set the record straight and say both of those actions, regardless of ideology, are against federal law and will be prosecuted with the full faith and credit of the Department of Justice, and you're refusing to do that. And that's the challenge that everyday Americans are having right now, is because they're seeing what you guys are doing to the people on January 6th, to the point where even a judge is saying that the speaker before me had 30 extra seconds. I asked the same deference that you gave to the previous speaker. That you have even judges who recently even held the Department of Corrections in contempt related to the way that the January 6 suspects have been treated, and you're refusing to even comment on the very acts that have just occurred here. And that's what is horribly wrong, and it is happening in our country, that the American people are seeing your refusal to answer those questions.
Mr. Attorney General, members, votes have been called on the House floor, so the committee will stand in recess